involved in a bunch of these interviews where, and I'll tell you, some of the best interviews, one of the best interviews I was ever involved with was Russell Wilson. I mean, it was like to a T. It was 15 minutes of pure jaw-dropping, like just knowledge coming from him. I've been told by a couple different people that Marcus's interviews so far have topped what Russell Wilson did here. That people are absolutely just blown away, the best that they have ever seen. They've ever seen.
Best they've ever seen. However, Marcus Mariota admits that he had his biggest adjustment, or he will have his biggest adjustments in the pros. He's not familiar with huddling. He says his Oregon offense didn't prepare him to be the classic drive-back passer that the NFL is looking for. Not a new note. Our draft experts have said the same. But let's talk about Riddick's comments. How much does the interview portion mean to you personally, Skip Bayless?
Carrie, Stephen A., no offense to Louis Riddick, who worked at a high level for the Redskins and the Eagles in their scouting departments, but this doesn't mean anything to me. I'm not surprised that Marcus Mariota is handling himself beautifully in these 15-minute sessions, and it doesn't mean much, if anything, to me. Stephen A., he's a great kid by all accounts. So many people, starting with Coach Dungy, Tony Dungy, believe with all their heart and soul in the character of Marcus Mariota. I have no issue with that. I have no doubt about that. And yet, I'm not sure how much of that is going to translate into how good he can be as a National Football League quarterback. We saw him handle himself beautifully through the Heisman ceremony. We saw his Heisman speech. It was emotional. It was moving. It was so well done, straight from the heart. Now, can he play quarterback? The most insightful quote that I read all morning as I prepped for this show was in USA Today in Jarrett Bell's Pro Football column. Jarrett Bell, obviously one of our ESPN insiders. And if we could put that quote up, please, so that we could see it, I will read it to you, Stephen A. This from Bruce Arians about evaluating college quarterbacks who obviously played in shotgun, no-huddle offenses. And Bruce Arians says, so many times you're evaluating a quarterback who has never called a play, never used a snap count. They hold up a card on the sideline, he kicks his foot, and he throws the ball. That ain't playing quarterback. There's no leadership involved there. There might be leadership on the bench, but when you get them, and they have to use verbiage and spit that verbiage out and change the snap count, they are light years behind. I believe that Marcus Mariota will be light years behind. I saw him say a couple things to Josina Anderson yesterday to that effect. He gets that. He knows that. He ran that Oregon offense as beautifully as any quarterback has ever run it. But it's a college, fast break, high action, lots of moving pieces offense that you rarely see work in this league. Now, maybe if he could fall to a Chip Kelly who could trade up to snatch him, I would give Marcus Mariota a shot. But as a pure drop-back passer for somebody else, I'm not sure about him, Stephen A. I told you all year long, I would watch him when he just threw from the pocket. He could be a little hit and a little miss. And I'm not sure about his overall feel for playing quarterback and making plays on the fly the way Russell Wilson constantly proves to us that he can make plays on his own with his feet and his arm. I'm just not sold on Marcus Mariota projecting to be a top pick in this draft as a can't-miss pro football quarterback. And if I'm Tampa Bay, and I know Chris Mortensen said the other day, don't be surprised if Lovie Smith, who's very close to Tony Dungy, and Dirk Cutter, his offensive coordinator, who likes this kind of offense, they might move in that direction because they might be a little concerned about taking a Jameis Winston and keeping him in the state of Florida there in Tampa. Maybe so, but I think they would make a huge mistake if they took with the #1 overall pick Marcus Mariota over Jameis Winston.
Skip Bayless, I don't disagree with you in what you're saying because I feel the same way about Marcus Mariota. I think he's got a lot of potential, but I think he's a system quarterback. He needs to land in the ideal place in order for him to be successful, whether it's Chip Kelly or something similar and akin to what he was doing in Oregon, if it's immediate production that you need for him, or unless he's going someplace like to New England or somewhere else where he's going to have time to learn the system, because I don't think anybody would question his football acumen, his football IQ, and I think that there's definitely an opportunity for him to be great on the next level. I just think some things, all the dominoes have to fall in place for him to believe that. But having said all of that, I do believe, Skip Bayless, that you're missing the boat on what Louis Riddick is intimating, along with a bevy of other executives, present or former, associated with the National Football League. What they're basically saying to you, whether they want to admit it or not, or whether they even see it this way or not, is that there's so much to take into account in terms of off-field habits, off-field behavior, that when it comes to Marcus Mariota, we don't have a concern about this guy. That's what they're saying. They're saying that we can get him in the film room. We trust his football intellect. Outside of that, since we're not questioning his ability to learn and comprehend, to adapt and move forward, now everything else we're going to concern ourselves with is his dedication, his commitment off the field. And they don't have any concerns with Marcus Mariota. He wows them so much as a person that they're willing to make concessions for him as a quarterback. Now, Riddick may have not been alluding to that himself directly, and I'm certainly not trying to put words in his mouth as it pertains to that. But in listening to so many people talk about these guys, what I find, and to me it's a bit disconcerting to some degree, some of these guys, you know what, they don't want to deal with the headaches. And I can't blame them for that, but then my point is that, well, then what is it that you do? Because to me, if everybody has to be choir boys and everybody has to be perfect and everybody has to be likable, you know, for them to meet some pristine requirement, you know, that's just not the real world. I would like to see them say this about a quarterback that might be a headache, but boy, can he really play. You know, I would love to see guys sit there and say, I just want one of these executives, one of these coaches to come out of the woodwork, Skip, and say, you know what? This guy might be a headache. He might be something, but he's a bad boy. He could play. It's my job to handle the rest. It's my job to make sure that he toes the line. Because what is it that you do? If a guy can play, I mean, damn, you want him to be a choir boy too? It just annoys me sometimes, because I think that when you hear them praise individuals like the Mariotas of the world, the Tim Tebows of the world, and others, I think they're speaking about their behavior and their character, and they're trying to equate that, well, what kind of a headache are they going to be as football players? And I think that factors into the equation, but they, on far too many occasions, try to come across as if they're just talking football, when in fact they're not.
Okay, so all last year before the draft, what was my constant point to you? I don't care about what Johnny Manziel does off the field unless alcohol becomes a big issue that he can't control. But all the other stuff, I told you, I don't. Yeah, but I kept telling you, I don't care about all that stuff because I think he can play. I think that somebody can deal with him because he, in the end, he just wants to make plays on Sunday afternoon as he did on Saturday afternoon at Texas A&M. So I was saying what you were saying. Now I think all these teams are going to overreact the other way and say, to a fault, oh my God, Marcus Mariota is the perfect young man, and he does have a great football mind, and we should go this direction because Johnny Manziel went that direction, and because Jameis had this litany of incidents that we all know about at Florida State.
Well, let me tell you something right now. Lovie Smith, listen, I don't want to sound disrespectful because I love me some Tony Dungy, but this whole thing about Marcus Mariota ahead of Jameis Winston, I ain't buying that. No way. I'm not listening to that. If I'm Lovie Smith, you better take Jameis Winston. Because let me tell you something, not only can Jameis Winston win, not only does Jameis Winston make every throw, but Jameis Winston has that it factor. Has that it factor that you just don't teach. And I'm not passing on that. I'm sorry.
Okay. All right. And yet, can I completely vouch for Jameis's off-field character? I cannot. Would I take the plunge on him? Yes, I would. But here's what I do want to say, Stephen A., because I've talked to a lot of people who have been around Jameis. He has high football IQ. He can stand on that chalkboard and he can X and O with anybody. So let's not discount that part of it. I'm not saying Marcus can't. He's got high IQ also. But do not underestimate Jameis's ability to X and O and to see the field and make the right decision. I know he threw 18 interceptions last year, and I don't love that. But I do think he was under a whole lot of distraction pressure because it was one thing after another that he was going through off the field during this previous season at Florida State.
Jameis Winston is a winner, plain and simple. And to me, I mean, it's a no-brainer. It's a no-brainer. And on the NFL level, I think everybody recognizes. I think the one good thing from whether it's the alcohol, whether it's the drugs, whether it's rehab, whether it's suspensions, whether it's the whole domestic violence issue, the child abuse issue, the list goes on and on. The NFL being in the league for so much negativity, you now have a virtual, if not literal, no tolerance policy, at least from Joe Public. And I think that guys who want to play and aspire to have a great NFL career have essentially been put on notice that very little nonsense is going to be tolerated. And I think that's going to end up being to the benefit of the NFL as a whole.
Okay, and Carrie, before you go on, let me say one last thing about Marcus Mariota. I was very intrigued that I saw Jim Trotter of ESPN say on SportsCenter the other night that he has talked to a couple of sources who wonder, hey, can Marcus command an NFL huddle? He's such a nice guy that he's not a commanding leadership type of guy. He leads by his actions, but maybe he wouldn't be able to take over a huddle. Well, he's never had to run a huddle, obviously, in college football. So I throw that out also. You can almost be nice and quiet to a fault.
Marcus Mariota, I agree with you. You can be quiet or not necessarily nice to a fault, but it does affect how people feel about you. He's been working with Browns quarterbacks coach Kevin O'Connell. He said this is what's going to help him be able to work with huddling when he gets to the pros. Moving on, we're going to talk about Jameis Winston. He also weighed in at the NFL Combine yesterday. We'll discuss just how important the Combine is for this Heisman-winning quarterback.